At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
In postseason football, you need to find that extra gear. On FanDuel, it's called Playoff Mode. Big boosts, more rewards, and a whole new way to live parlay with Drive SGP. Turn on Playoff Mode, only on FanDuel.
New customers bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $5 deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com.
We're here because your heightened awareness deserves heightened entertainment. The Last Show with David Cooper.
At work, could you use AI to cheat and have it do your job for you? Well, big tech doesn't like that idea and is suddenly demanding receipts from employees. Things like dashboards, badge swipes in the office, proof of effort. In a workplace where productivity is no longer assumed, it is audited by these companies. It's looking like 2026 will be the if you did the work, then prove it year for workers at tech companies. I'm here with someone who's recently written on this. His name is Tim Paradis, and he's a future of work correspondent at Business Insider. Tim, I couldn't imagine a more appropriate title for you, future of work correspondent. Is this the future of work? Proving that you actually did the work.
Well, thanks for having me, David. You know, it's funny, at least at certain firms, it seems to be the thing, right? We said in the piece, like if 2025 was about calling workers to really go above and beyond, 2026 is about making sure they do it. So, yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out.
So show your work sounds something like a third grade math teacher might say to me. Let's look at what it looks like in Silicon Valley, where you've got smart kids who are good at cheating, and now AI gives them the tools to do it. What does that look like? What is monitoring or showing or proving that you did the work look like at a tech company?
I mean, in some ways, the sense we got was that it was almost like sort of maybe bringing practices that had been existing in other industries to Silicon Valley a little bit more, making it a little bit more widespread. So thinking, like you mentioned at the top, tracking badge swipes. So making sure people are actually in the office complying with, return to office mandates, or just looking at, at Amazon, for example, a colleague of mine reported that, they're looking more at individual accomplishments, not that they hadn't done it before, but they're looking closer at, okay, what are the things you actually did? What's your sort of ROI? And they're trying to, I think, be more, from what I can tell, clearer and maybe more specific about certain things that people got done. So I think it's a way that maybe, if you would, mature the performance evaluation process.
So for years, like I'd say up until the pandemic, maybe even a little during the pandemic, tech kind of ran on vibes. And I worked in big tech at this time, so this hits home for me. Things like trust, employee autonomy. People at tech companies would say, we hire adults and we trust them. We don't monitor them. This seems like a big psychological change, having to make employees prove that they're doing the work. Is it just because AI entered the room and people could use large language models to code for them, to write their reports, to do things like this? Or is it an underlying financial thing, like a more tumultuous tech market, new CFOs coming in and saying, why are we paying these engineers so much money when they don't do their work? What is the cause of this?
So it's a good question. I think it's a few things. The sense that I got from talking to folks is it is partly financial, is in that they're spending an enormous amount of money on AI and AI investments. And so it's just a huge outlay. And as you well know, a lot of those returns have yet to bear out. And so there's that fear that we're getting out over our skis, right? That we've seen that on Wall Street even. And then the other part of it is just the idea that it's an employer's market, and if you want to work in tech, it's pretty hard to do these days in many cases. So they can demand more of workers without getting, much pushback because they have the power. So it's kind of from what we could tell, a confluence of things.
Is this really about productivity, or is it more like managers being afraid they can't tell the difference between the brilliance of their employees and machine assistants? I think there are managers out there who can't tell the difference between work created by ChatGPT or diligently done at the keyboard by an actual employee.
I think also part of it is, if you think about it, none of this is quite settled yet, right? We're all having this debate where some companies are saying, yeah, go ahead, use AI in your interview because we just want to know that you can use this tool the same way that you'd let somebody use a calculator to show that they understand the mathematics, potentially. Whereas others would say, absolutely not, none of this. And so there's no real agreement yet on what's acceptable from what we can tell, at least. And so because we're kind of in this figuring it out phase, it seems like there are a lot of forces at play. So some bosses may not care at all that you're using ChatGPT to do this thing, or they want you to be using coding assistants, and they'll ding you if you don't do it because they know that you could be so much more productive.
It actually is not so revolutionary to track badge swipes, though. I know tech workers will be offended by it. How can they monitor me like this? But any other job, like any kind of like manufacturing job, factory job, any other normal job, people punch in and they punch out, and that's the time they get paid for. Why are tech employees so shocked that this is coming for them?
And I wouldn't say probably, I talk to some tech employees pretty regularly. I wouldn't say all of them are shocked, but I think to your point, it's really about where they've come from, which was there used to be more autonomy. There used to be more of this notion of let's get a bunch of geniuses in the room and let them create. Whereas now, if you're going to say we need to make sure you're here on the premises from this time to this time, you can't just coffee badge as they call it, or you can't just hop in and out. It feels that like extra sobriety maybe just feels new for tech, but it's certainly not new to your point about many other industries, and nor is it that have always been that way, right?
At the risk of derailing the coffee swipe, I had a friend who in the heyday of tech, like in 2020, he was an in-house barista who made, I think, like $90,000 or $80,000 a year for a big tech company. That role is no longer exists at the same tech company. So that's kind of the way things were then.
Wow.
There is a paradox here, though, okay? AI, employees are told they're supposed to use it to save time, to be more productive. But then on the other hand, they're being told you're not working hard enough. You have to prove you're doing the work. How can an employee function under that paradigm? It seems impossible.
I mean, I think that that's probably a question that's even beyond tech. We saw an announcement last week from the Citigroup CEO talking about this is the year of really stepping it up. And so it's not just in Silicon Valley, but it's this idea that, again, because employers have the upper hand, particularly for these desk jobs, these white collar jobs, they can simply demand more. And they're just not going to get, they're not going to meet much resistance because what can people do? They know it's a tough job market.
Is there a parallel in history with another industry where employees had it great and then started to be monitored more and be told they need to show their work more? Or is this really a new thing that's occurring because of AI?
It's a good question. I mean, nothing jumps to mind at this second, but I would say, I guess you see this in industries as they get larger and mature. I think in the early days, if you talk to anybody who was in the early days of any kind of field, they'll often talk about, as we would say here in the US, like Wild West of this. And there was a lot of, it was kind of freewheeling and we didn't have all these parameters and it was a lot less buttoned down than it is now. I think that's just the nature of how industries evolve sometimes. And certainly as they become more corporate and then you have investors that you're answering to, you've got CFOs, to your point earlier, paying, why are we paying these brilliant guys and your poor friend, the barista who no longer has a job? Like, why are we doing this kind of stuff if we could be a little bit more like company X over in, manufacturing that has again, a more restrained approach to how they spend money.
Did you talk to a tech executive who said that productivity can't be assumed anymore?
I talked to I talked to some, I'm trying to think who we spoke to for this story. I talked to people, not necessarily for this story, but other folks, to inform prior reporting. And I've also talked to some professors who spend a lot of time looking at this industry, and they sort of get that sense that, because partly, again, this fear of, gosh, we're spending all this money on AI, what are we going to do? One of the experts I talked to about this actually made the interesting point too, that because AI itself is so quantifiable, like you can say we're doing all these things and here are all these dashboards and reports. Then we have this massive side of our ledger, which is all the workers. And so we need to have a little bit more granularity, a little bit more insight into what they're doing and sort of what they're, whatever cliche you use, proof points or whatever corporate jargon you'd use, like what is their ROI as well?
Now, if employers feel that way about their employees, what does this say about hiring right now? Like, is the market really tough? I know you said that earlier, but can you say more about it?
Yeah, I mean, the folks I talk to, professionally, even personally, I know a lot of people. It's just tough for a lot of these jobs. Companies are. It's not that nobody's hiring. It's not that there's no hiring. In the U.S. here, the overall employment rate is quite low, but there are, people who've been out of work for more than 6 months or so is ticking up, and so for certain people in certain fields, it is really tough, and particularly where there's that influx of AI. I think there's a lot of question around companies are asking, what can we do with AI and what do we need people for? And can we just do, quote unquote, do more with less?
Well, the article is called Big Tech's New Rule for Workers. Show Your Work. You can read it in Business Insider, where Tim Paradis is a future of work correspondent. Tim, I always enjoy chatting with you. Thanks for being on the show.
Likewise. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Welcome to Survivor 50.
February 25th on Global.
We chose you to represent 25 years of the greatest adventure on television.
It's the biggest season ever.
The twist is going to open up Pandora's box. Now I see Zach Brown on Survivor.
Welcome to Survivor, Mr. Beast.
Feels a little like a high school reunion meets a massacre.
Survivor 50th season, Wednesday, February 25th on Global. Stream on Stack TV.